Happy Friday, and welcome to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm Michelle Pache, and I'm here today with Dr. Ryce and Dale Hoffman. We warmly welcome you to the show, and thank you for choosing to be with us. Today is March 21st, 2014. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk with Dr. Ryce. We encourage you to call in with your comments or questions, allowing you to actively strengthen and deepen your process. So now let's welcome Michael in the process of learning and practicing forgiveness.
Well, thank you, young lady. I appreciate that introduction, and we appreciate the fact that you're there supporting us by operating the switchboard today. And today, of course, is Aramaic Friday, so our project is a shift just a little bit different than the focus on learning forgiveness, in that we want to look more deeply into the ancient Aramaic language and understand the words and ideas that come out of the Aramaic as they were originally intended to be understood. If you look into the Aramaic language, you will find that it is the root language, interestingly enough, and to me this is such a huge and significant fact. It's the root language of at least 6 of the world's major religions. And I believe there's a reason for that. And the reason that it's the root language of at least 6 of the world's major religions is that there was a comprehension of how the world worked and how the human fit into the world that is not expressible in any other language, which is why, in so many cases, a teaching based in the restoration of love, in the restoration of human life to human forms, has been watered down and turned into something that it was never intended to be, and that is a teaching based in fear. In fact, if you go back to the Old Testament in the Aramaic, you hear the words where the Creator is speaking to humans and saying that fear is a doctrine of man. And that one's pretty accurately represented in the Greek translations that we tend to see in the West. But most of the other ideas and the how-tos that come out of the Aramaic that were turned into religions by men, but originally were simply meant to be, here's how the world works, folks. Here's how you best function within that world, is so clear, it's so crisp in the Aramaic that translating and transferring its meaning to other languages is, at best, difficult. In many cases, it takes a whole paragraph to express the meaning contained in one word in Aramaic. And so we want to uncover that understanding. If the originators of those religions were to sit in many churches in the West today, their expression would be, that's all Greek to me, because so much Greek philosophy has been injected into the original Aramaic teachings that essence of the meaning is lost. And so we welcome Dale Allen Hoffman, whose website is daleallenhoffman.com, with all kinds of just amazing, awesome information. And we certainly appreciate getting to share the planet with Dale, and the fact that Dale's committed to a whole year of Aramaic Fridays where we get to go into this conversation about understanding that original language in its original context. So welcome to the show, Dale. Glad you're here.
It's good to hear your voice. Didn't hear it for a couple of weeks. How's everything down there in Costa Rica?
It is hot and absolutely awesome. We've since we finished the intensive, we've gotten to do a little bit of playtime. Yesterday, we went up and spent about 6 hours on the property that we're working toward making a HeartLand South from, and so that was pretty awesome. We got to hang out a little bit in the natural swimming pool that's surrounded by rock that flows out of the mountains. We just covered the whole property, got one great walk up to the top of the mountain, which was quite an interesting challenge on the trail that's been established. But otherwise, the farm, there's a couple there who are operating the farm aspect of the property, and there are at least 4 greenhouses with just all kinds of different plants growing in them, over 1,000 fruit trees. We got to eat lunch off of the property yesterday, so it was a pretty cool day. It was pretty sweet.
Cool. I've been looking a lot at the photos that you've had posted of the spaces down there, and all of a sudden it seems like I'm seeing Costa Rica everywhere. Cool. Well, I mean, as you get, like you were mentioning, like a funding project or something, as soon as you get something like stirred up, let me know, because I'd love to megaphone that out to everybody my message goes out to as well. That would be beautiful.
Cool. Well, that's kind of now at the forefront of my brain, and putting together a crowdfunding project to invite people to participate and assist in making this an actuality, that it moves from the reality phase. We've been doing some due diligence and communicating with the real estate people, and there's a lot of there's a whole different legal system here. It's based in Napoleonic law as opposed to common law as it is in the States, and so it's quite a different animal. And so we've just been taking our time. There's no rush about it. We feel if this property is the property that's supposed to happen, then it'll be there and available, and if it's not, then it wasn't supposed to be. And we're just kind of learning, studying, and doing our due diligence to understand how to put this whole project together. And we're actually looking into it. And if anybody has any information on crowdfunding, any expertise in that arena that's in our listening audience, we would love the input and support of anyone who might have some information in that direction. We're actually looking at probably going with the crowdfunding organization that's associated with the A&E television network, seeing as how we're looking at doing some television work down here and creating novelas, which are short-term soap operas that seem to be an addiction in the whole Spanish world globally, and creating them instead of just the old drama and trauma routine, actually bringing the tools into the forefront of these telenovelas to show people that instead of living, if anybody's watched soap operas in the States, you know that the same drama and trauma story is going on in As the Stomach Turns, or actually I think it was As the World Turns. What's been going on for 30, 40 years. And, if you haven't watched it in 40 years, you can turn it on, you know exactly who's doing what to who and how they're doing it. It's the same thing. And so instead of why is this happening to me again, we're planning on injecting the tools and the processes of healing so that people can get the idea that things can actually change. And the title of the telenovela will probably be, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Seeing as how it's a title that most everybody smiles at and recognizes because they've been there, done that.
Wow. That's beautiful. It's amazing how when you and I first met, however many years ago, what's that, 19 years ago, none of this stuff, I mean, obviously soap operas were around, but all these new avenues of getting it out. I had some friends that used the internet, and they would type 4 letters, and about 5 minutes later they would show up on the screen. Things are so much different, so fast, and I think I know that going forward, it's so untapped. Here, as an example, in Asheville, there was a company that was quietly laying fiber optic cable all over North Carolina, not really talking about it, and all of a sudden a news story came out last week saying that Asheville is going to have gigabit internet service through fiber optics within the next 2 months, and that they would start rolling it out to the rural areas, and what their next level is to get it up to 10 gigabits and then up to 100, which is crazy because, well, it's not crazy, that's beautiful. 100 gigabits, you could download the entire Titanic movie in full 1080p HD and surround sound in less than 3 seconds. So things are changing fast.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, one part of our vision here for the property is about an 1,800 square foot 2-story hacienda that is absolutely beautiful. It's built in Costa Rican style, and it's just amazing. And the second story, what we're looking at is that will be the classroom. The first story will be the food service The second story will be the classroom and video studio. So we're looking at a full-blown HD video studio that will be able to create television programming and uplink it from here. And that's one of the reasons for looking at the Arts and Entertainment Network, that they're also looking to support and fund things that they can then put into their programming. So, and we do have a friend in Tampa who is, Jeremiah, who is a national television broadcaster with his own channel where he does real estate sales and antiquity sales and jewelry sales. So he broadcasts 24/7, and he's volunteered to assist us in getting a studio set up. And so who knows, we may have the Aramaic channel here in Costa Rica too. And who knows what the future is for all of us.
Yeah, I would recommend looking into Roku, the little players that people plug into their televisions. Amazon has one coming out. There's Google Chrome, because those sort of internet-based channels are other ways of... Actually, I spent a couple hours the other day looking at Costa Rica on one of those channels and different treehouse communities and things like that. Anything to get the message out now. It's almost like I'm all ears. People come up to me with ideas all the time. Why don't you try this, try that? It's like, that's what it's all about. It's literally, I said this on the show, I think last week when you weren't here, which was, it struck me many years ago, the first time I ever heard you speak, when you said that the goal was to get this to every mind on the planet. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, hey, what kind of a goal is that? It's so huge, it's big, but it's amazing. And now it's like I'm plugged into my own sacred flow, so to speak, exactly the way you were then. And it's not even like it's not a strain in any way whatsoever to think about that, because you don't look at the whole and think, oh my God, that's going to be so intense. I've pulled so many things and forgiven so many things out of my own heart, out of my own source of thinking, that I look at that now and I'm focused on the next one and the next one and whatever's going on right now in this moment. And it's amazing to be able to put something on the internet and then have such a response come back from all over the world, something like an MP3 or something, and really hear how it affects people. Or the radio show. I mean, how much more of an example do you need?
Precisely, and I think that if we can successfully create these telenovelas where the whole Spanish world, my understanding is both male and female throughout the Spanish world, everything stops to watch the telenovelas. And so if we can successfully create that and zip that throughout the Spanish world, then it's a very short leap to start to translate it into English and to other languages and make it globally available. And to have an infrastructure here that delivers that globally, I think is very realistic, and it's becoming a no-brainer to just move it forward.
Beautiful.
So what's exciting in your world?
What's happening in my world is, just literally not even 5 minutes before I got on the call last week, I got on sort of in the middle of like, how do I process this in real time, and went through sort of the processing of the information I got right before last week's call, which was that my brother's house had burned down overnight in New Jersey. And I wanted to let everybody know, everything, they're great. They weren't there. Their dog was pulled out by my brother and his neighbor. She was unconscious, but they brought her back. Everybody's doing okay. The house is gone. But another thing that's on my mind at the moment, so I just wanted to let everybody know they're okay. The other thing was at 9 a.m. this morning, a message went out here on the Eastern Seaboard about a retreat I'm doing, a weekend retreat at Mountain Light Sanctuary in May 9th through 11th. What it's focused on is, what it's called is Aramaic Secrets of Isis, Mary Magdalene, Reawakening the Divine Feminine in the Yeshua Teachings. And it's about, the retreat's going to be focused on what we do know about Mary Magdalene and what we don't know about Mary Magdalene, and certain things like some of the historical stories, and yet boiling it down to that how the feminine aspect of Jesus' teachings was removed, mostly starting in the late 2nd century, and then as it kept moving forward, it was just completely moved. Of course, the kingdom was called kingdom when it's a feminine term, and the inner states of experience, the inside processes like forgiveness were, of course, put outside, and heaven was made into a location rather than a state of being. And so I'm going to be focusing on that. But it's funny because we announced it at 9 a.m., and we said we were going to limit it to 21 people, and we're already a third full. Just like that, it was like, pow. So obviously I struck a nerve with what people were looking for.
Cool. You know, one of the things that really brings home the point of how Yeshua, by those who would like to put people under control rather than give them the liberty of the teachings, if you look at the Apostles' Creed, you know, it came out of the Nicene Council, 3rd century. And, you know, one of the ways to keep people under control is to keep them in phenomenon, to keep them hypnotized by fantastical events. And if you look at that Apostles' Creed, you see two fantastical events and the whole life and teachings of Yeshua put into a comma between them. And if you review that, it says that he was born of the Virgin Mary, comma, there's his life, there's his teaching, suffered and died under Pontius Pilate. Where is his life and teachings? It's all compressed into a comma. Let's make it phenomenal. Let's make it something otherworldly so that real people in real time don't have access to the real tools that the real man brought to earth and gave to the people around him. And, you know, to me, the whole point of this work is to decompress that comma rather than stand in the phenomenology that surrounds much of his teachings and his name. Phenomenal. Just call on a name and everything will be okay. Not what the man said, but hey, somebody's been convinced through fear that if you ever question doing that, you are really in deep trouble. And, you know, just decompressing that comma to me is what it's all about, and giving real people the real how-to and the real tools in real time to change what's happening in the world around them. And it's just monumental when people tap in and start to do that. And also some of the challenges that one goes through as one begins to do that. The physical, mental, emotional challenges of what's been held in the structure for so long, for so many generations, can be, without real support, can be so overwhelming that people just break down and drug themselves and go back to sleep. So, you know, offering the support to people in real time, and that's one of the things I see with these telenovelas, that we can show the real impact. There's some of it in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? We talked to Richard, and you can see how, you know, we're in a conversation and stuff starts to come up for him, and gee, I want a cigarette. Give me a cup of coffee. Let me just, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to deal with this. And so I think the telenovela is going to take it to another level, where we can show how when people don't have their drugs, the kinds of things that come up from within them, and it'll all be based in real life stories, real events that have happened to real people, and what the healing process looks like. So I'm excited about getting to bring that into the video realm, where people can sit in front of it and actually see it. And of course, the other thing that I really appreciate, and we were talking about this yesterday with Dr. Tim, is the fact that we have going on 4 years of archives now with conversations such as this that lay out the details and give people access to the real teachings. It's pretty awesome.
I'm honored to take credit in my part for hooking you and Carol Guy up to be able to have the show going. It's awesome. I never, in my wildest dreams, could have imagined that it would grow to something like this, and I really honor that commitment that you made to do this on such a consistent basis. Just like with all your work, you're walking it and you're doing it. You're not standing back and pointing some kind of fingers. You're literally, it's your life. It's in the way you travel. It's in the way you offer the teachings out there. It's in the radio show on all levels, and it's always been an inspiration to me. not so much to emulate so much as to find that spark within me, or should I say uncover that light within me beneath all those bushel baskets, where that's the natural way that we live, to be in that expression of the one. So I acknowledge and honor you in that. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that acknowledgement, and we definitely want to point a finger at the moon, and then we're beginning the flight. We're on our way to just, how to get there, how to do it, and it's definitely a learning process for me. Every day I learn new levels, new pieces of the puzzle as I watch and support people go through the process, as I review some of the stages that I've gone through in this healing process. When in the Greek translations they say, Yeshua says, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother, and how that becomes kind of a bleeding heart statement from the Greek. But when you go to the Aramaic, what he's saying is, you must go inside yourself and remove. And I've started in the not too distant past to substitute the word remove for forgive, because so many people think about, I'm forgiving my neighbor, I'm forgiving myself. Well, you can't really remove your neighbor, you can't really remove yourself. That's murder and suicide, not very acceptable. But you can reach inside yourself, never belongs. So when Yeshua says you must remove from your heart, which is your own unconscious, the hidden parts of your own mind, everything that you've projected into your brain's image of your brother, all of a sudden, it comes down to where the rubber meets the road. You've got to go to work and go inside yourself and really start to look at what's in there, which is just the total polar opposite of what the culture teaches, where the culture, tells us it's all everybody else's fault, and, you just be nice and you forgive them, and then everything will be taken care of. And that's just such a fraud to lull people into this false sense of security that when they've let somebody else off the hook for something that's going on inside themselves, then that something is handled, which, of course, when you really look at it, everybody knows it's not handled, but the denial system sort of, keeps it out of view. I know that one of the new videos that we're getting ready to process and make available is one that's done by a medical doctor, psychiatrist named Gilkerson, and it's called The Myths of Marijuana. And this psychiatrist goes into a middle school where he's talking to kids from 13 to 17 or 18, and it's about marijuana. And he asked the question, how many here think marijuana is harmless or one of the least harmless drugs? And, everybody in this audience, all these kids put up their hand. And then he asked the question, how many here know somebody, one or more people, who've been burned out on pot? And everybody raises their hand. And he then points out and very pointedly says, so every one of you knows one or more people with organic brain syndrome from the use of pot, and you sit here and tell me you think pot is not harmful? And it's just such a confronting thing to look at that and recognize that the part of the mind that's damaged by pot is the part of the mind that can assess damage. The part of the mind that's been blocked by those who form dogma and doctrine based in fear and hostility is the part of the mind that wakes us up and says, oh, I've got work to do. I need to look inside myself. And to deny the damage that is done by not looking inside ourselves, to not see that damage is very akin to the pot story and all the drugs. I mean, if you look throughout our whole culture is drugged at every turn, whether it's the first cup of coffee in the morning or the last cigarette at night, or, the jolt of sugar from ice cream, or whether it's just the pure, I was saying yesterday we were at a restaurant and they served brown rice, which I really appreciate the fact that, some restaurants have brown rice. And how strange it is to have to go into a restaurant and say, I would like my food with nutrition, please. Because when you look at it, virtually everywhere you look, the nutrition has been separated out from the food. It's been sold to the farmers to feed their pigs and their cattle. So the purveyors of those things get to sell it twice and profit from it twice, and then the third time there's a profit in the sickness that is done that follows someone who eats nutrition-free food. And yet, you look at the empty white bread that's part of most everybody's lunch when they walk into a deli or a restaurant. The nutrition, it's just, the whole game is so bizarre and so set up, whereas Yeshua gave us a set of tools for changing the game. And to me, again, that's why decompressing the comma becomes key. And I think Jeannie's got something to share with us. Okay. So do you have any thoughts on that idea of you must forgive from your heart? Any expansions in that direction? Dale?
You asking me? Yeah. You know what that got me thinking of? It got me thinking about something that actually one of my friends, one of my closest collaborators, Dr. Albert LaChance, got me thinking of how in the Gospel of Luke, it's the first chapter, it's maybe like 114, 115, somewhere in that area, where Zechariah is being told about the arrival of John the Baptist. And they say something very interesting there, the Malakah, the angelos that's speaking to him. The messenger says that he must drink no wine or have no strong drink, meaning no alcohol, essentially. And it's one of those lines that you just don't think about. Basically, he's supposed to keep a virgin brain. He's supposed to have a brain that's untouched by some sort of substances or any kind of inebriation, intoxication, any kind of drug, anything that's not basically organic in the system. And there's a great, it's not even really a joke, he's serious, and it is, Albert makes the chance, why in the world would so many ministers and priests not talk about that line? Usually because in a lot of cases, so many of them are loaded themselves, so why bring light to it? But it really is something to think about, how it's and I'm not, as far as I can remember, I don't remember anywhere in the Holy Bible where it mentions that with someone, like basically, no strong drink, no wine, keep the brain clean and pure, which brings me to that incredible book from Joseph Chilton Pierce, The Biology of Transcendence, where he actually goes into that idea of the virgin brain and a mind that's completely pure and uncluttered. I mean, that's just in terms of not adding chemicals and things to it, but when you start bringing in the lack of nutrition and all of the, and when I say chemicals as in drugs, you start bringing in other kinds of stuff that's in the air, that's, you can walk into some salad bar places or something like Atlanta Bread Company is a good example. I know I've got a lot of friends that go to Atlanta Bread Company, but I can't stay in there for more than a couple of minutes because I walk through the front door and all the chemical smell blows me out of the door. I shouldn't have named a place specifically, but there's a lot of places like that. And I look at forgiveness or removing those roots within in the heart, at the source of thinking. I look at that as exactly the same thing. It's so many people, as an example, can be so focused on their physical body and completely ignore the spiritual body, or some can be so completely obsessive with the spiritual body that they somehow think of the physical body as something separate, when in fact that physical body is, of course, that illusion. But it all goes together, and I think that's why it's one of the reasons I'm so profoundly grateful to be alive right now at this point in humanity, because we're waking up. We had a long time of decades and decades, if not hundreds of years, if not centuries, of basically being asleep. And the religious and the political and the economic systems supported that sleep because that's what they wanted. And that's how we found these intense morphs and changes in the Yeshua teachings and the supposedly Christian message, which doesn't even know what the word Christ means, unfortunately. But I mean, it's all in that waking up. I talk all the time about how the young kids are coming to me in their teens and early 20s, and they're like, just tell us like it is. Tell us what's on the page. Don't, candy coat it. Don't try to tell us how to think. Just show us. We can figure it out. And they can. And a lot of them are choosing to do that completely with a virgin brain. And it's pretty, and I got to say, that word virgin in Aramaic, beitola, beitolta, they both mean pure. That's it. It's not that medieval, middle-aged thing where was the hymen ruptured or anything like that when you're talking about a Virgin Mary, etc., who, of course, the Virgin Mary was based on Isis in the Coptic philosophies, but it just meant pure, and it doesn't have to be a woman, of course. Any of us can be that when we choose to be clean and open, and just keep removing those layers. The more layers we remove, the more pure we become. And if anything, I think that's what we're all waking up to right now.
For sure. And the Beatitude that speaks about having a sound and purified mind, that's one of the first requirements for accessing the deeper neural structures that were referred to. And when I tell people that the Beatitudes talk about neural structures in the Aramaic, most people look at me and go, now, come on, 2,000 years ago they understood neural structures, get out of here. And in fact, they did understand how neural structures operated, and it's built right into the language that no other language on the planet comprehends the functioning of the mind and the activity of neurons firing. It's just amazing. And if that mind is not, as that particular Beatitude says, sound and purified, then the deeper structures that were implanted to guide us can't be available. And they've been layered over by the hostilities, the fears, and then, of course, the drugs that create chemical inhibitors. One of the things we talked about in the show just last week is that in the United States now, the deaths from legal prescription drugs are far greater than the number of deaths from illegal drugs. And in a great majority of cases, the deaths from illegal drugs, the gateway drug was a prescription. The thing that somebody started on that led them to opium or heroin or crack or what have you, the place they started was with a legal drug that cost so much money that they couldn't afford their addiction anymore, so they switched to the less expensive illegal drugs. But the gateway was a prescription. And, I forget which state it was that just recently went after a drug pusher for murder because he supplied, and these are new laws that are going on the books, that he supplied a man who died from this overdose and being charged with murder. And I just hold the space that so-called law will go far beyond the illegal drugs into the so-called legal drugs that lead to people's deaths, and the people who supply those in an illicit manner, and there's just so many. It's just, when you start looking at it in America, it's unbelievable that they actually start holding these people who put the pen to the script accountable for the death. It's just time to clean the whole game up. And this was comprehended thousands of years ago when they said things like, you got to keep your brain clean if you're going to have a true spiritual life. You've just got to do it.
It's actually opiates and all of the, it's those prescription ones. We, unfortunately, here in North Carolina have been given the banner as being the number one producer and consumer of crystal meth in the country right now, which is, of course, pulled from over-the-counter pseudoephedrine. Interesting. And New Hampshire, where Albert LaChance lives, New Hampshire is number one in prescription drug overdoses and addiction. And it's pretty crazy, actually. We personally, my family and I, have actually had our own home raided more than once by people that were either friends and or people that were distant relatives, digging through our homes trying to see if we had anything here, which of course there is nothing. And it's an interesting thing to see that when someone is locked in there and they don't if they can't get to the point of realizing that they've got a problem, and usually that's what it is. It's constantly, no, I've got it under control, I've got it all worked out, etc. You know, I remember when I had a hernia surgery, how many years back, maybe 15 years ago, and they gave me some sort of like over-the-counter morphine type thing, and it was just in a pill form. And for 3 nights, I had the most horrid, horrifying, full-blown Technicolor surround sound nightmares that I've ever had in my entire life. And after only 3 days of just taking those a couple of times a day to dull that pain, and it's funny, it didn't dull the pain was still there, I just didn't give a crap about it. But after 3 days, my hands were shaking when I woke up on that morning of the 4th morning, and I said to my wife, I said, hell or high water, regardless of pain, I ain't taking nothing, I'm done with this. And it was amazing. My eyes were turning colors. What was going into the toilet, you can actually see the toxicity. You can feel it. And it took me weeks to get that out of my system. And then the more I started reading about it, I started finding out that that kind of stuff actually lodges itself into your fatty tissues, etc. And if someone goes in just exactly like this supposed, we call spiritual healing and the forgiveness work, it's exactly the same, how those things literally lock themselves and crystallize within your energy system. And you do something like still point breathing, you do something like doing worksheets, that stuff starts decrystallizing. It almost becomes like a liquid nature. It comes back into the system. Now, we used to say that stuff, of course, 2 decades ago, and people were going, oh, God, you're just making this up, new agey swill. But in fact, now the leading edge medical science says that's exactly what happens, that our thoughts literally become physiology. You think of the neuropeptide, you think of guys like Bruce Lipton or Candace Pert, and it becomes that communicator, and it literally locks in those different areas of the body. And I had an amazing private session with someone last week that I mentioned on the show last week, who basically the guy started doing the worksheets, and then he's like, I don't know, they don't seem to work for me. And I'm like, how many have you done? Well, I'm like, okay. And I said, you do realize, it says, this, from Michael's work, it's not Dr. Feelgood. As soon as you open that box and you're willing to take responsibility for that, anything, as your energy level begins to increase, your vitality level increases, of course, more stuff's going to keep coming out. And we've got to just keep putting the pen to the paper, getting the breath moving, doing the tools, doing it, putting them to work over and over and over and over again. But then it could be weeks, months, or even years down the road. All of a sudden you realize when you take a breath, it feels like you're taking a deeper breath. And you realize that you're in a similar situation as something that would have happened 2 years ago, and you don't have nearly as much of a rub, or maybe you don't even realize that there's no rub at all because you've actually thrown that out of the system. If we could just get that through the publishing industry and let people realize, it's not about looking for something to add on. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of the prosperity teachings are so disjointed today, because they're telling people you're already complete. Now let's create all these different stresses in your life and write every single thing you can possibly want in this world, in this life. Now let's go after them and get them because you're the master of the universe. And in some ways that's true. But unfortunately, what it doesn't address is what's in the system, what's on top of there, like the bushel baskets. And if we could just bring, using something like an affirmation, not as an affirmation of denial, but in fact a catalyst, like MindShifters, of course, using that as a catalyst to bring up whatever is in resonance with that, letting people realize, look, yes, you are whole and you are complete, but you've got so much junk piled on top of that, we're going to have to remove that stuff. And I keep telling people, just keep doing it one layer at a time. Whatever's up right now, step into it, throw it off. Whatever's up in the next now, step into it, throw it off, and learn the tools. And the more you do them, the more natural, quote unquote, it becomes. And then you realize a few miles down the road, wow, I think this stuff, it may actually work. But in the beginning, to be able to have that support structure and the support group like this radio show, where people can come on and say, all right, hold on a second, these worksheets don't work for me, even though they work for everybody else. Actually, they are working. It just doesn't feel so good, especially in the beginning when that stuff starts sort of boiling out of the system.
For sure. Well, when you talk about the neuropeptides and the showing, of course, in the laboratory, you think the thought becomes a molecule. Molecule lands on a cell and becomes the chemistry in the cell. The cell replicates the chemical structure of that molecule At least that's the surface explanation. There's still a deeper understanding, but just that much of a surface explanation out of the laboratory, and then go back 2,000 years ago. And it's interesting how this particular passage has been made something sacred to people, so they never ever access the deeper aspect of it or the real meaning. So you go to the opening words in the book of John in Aramaic, it says, in the beginning was the mind energy, the willed action, and the mind energy became flesh. You think a thought, creates a neuropeptide. Neuropeptides circulate and ends up in the flesh, in the cellular structure. And so when people anesthetize themselves against that, they're locking those things into their structures. I know I worked with a young lady just a few days ago, and she started doing this work about 10 years ago, and maybe 13 or 14 years ago, she had gone through some tough times in a divorce, and the threatening father wanted to take away the child, and due to the anxiety involved there, was put on a couple of prescription medications, an antidepressant, and then of course, having taken the antidepressant, then there was a need for some sleep medication, started to use that, and if she would miss a pill, this goes back 14, 15 years ago, her whole inside, she shared with me, would just start to shake, and she'd go into these tremors and a real trauma, and have to stuff the medication in her mouth until she realized that it was destructive and broke off from it. She started to do this work about 10 years ago, and pretty sincerely and with a lot of effort, and has done a lot of work. And it was just last week that she shared with me that she was in that in-between state of sleep and awakening, and all of a sudden that shaking that had become familiar with taking the drug that she was taking, which was one of the popular antidepressants along with one of the popular sleep medications, that all of a sudden she found herself starting to wake up and have that shaking going on. And it's been almost 15 years since she took those pills. And her first thought, coming to conscious awareness that this shaking was going on that was familiar from 15 years ago, her first thought was, I got to go get my medication. And then realized that she's detoxing the chemicals in the cell. It took her 10 years of sincerely doing this work to get to a level of vitality where her structure could surface and remove that level of energetic interference. You got to have a completely sound and purified mind, says the Beatitudes in Aramaic, and that's what they were talking about. You can't carry those chemicals around in your cell, and you can't get rid of them until you're at a level of vitality and have done enough work to walk through them. And to invite people and get people to understand and build the brain cells for making the choice to do the work and to really continue and commit and go through those challenges is really a huge challenge. And so building the brain cells, one of the reasons for the commitment to do this show on a daily basis, aside from simply being here to support people, is to help people to build the brain cells to understand, that's what's happening. Because if one doesn't understand what's happening, then one runs off to get a pill. And by taking the pill, they miss the opportunity to really do the real healing work, because real healing is virtually unknown in our culture. What's known is disease treatment. Well, just stuff a pill down your throat, then you'll feel better. And that's true, but feeling better isn't what healing is about. Facing and throwing off, that is, in Aramaic, as Yeshua said it, forgiving from your heart or your unconscious those things you feel your brother has done wrong, that is, that you've projected into your brain's image of another, recognizing that you're feeling it and it's an energy within your own structure. And sadly, most people won't stay around long enough to hear that often enough to really get to apply it on a practical level. And that's what we're here to support, and that's one of the reasons I appreciate the fact that we've got all these archives that people can go back and listen to and listen to and listen to and build the brain cells, and just what a gift it is to all of us.
One of the things I hear from a lot of people is they'll tell me after they do a lot of the work and they really roll their sleeves up, the quote that I usually hear the most is, wow, for the first time in however many years, decades, I finally feel like myself again. Almost like you feel that you're in that trance. And but that's just the first step, is recognizing that you're in a trance. Then you got to put you've got to walk the path, and the rubber's got to hit the road in order to start actually doing the work. And if we could all just do our piece, we would realize that it's never about something outside. It's always about me. It's about my view. It's about, am I conscious? Am I pure? Am I completely awake in this moment? Or is there something concealing that true vision? And you mentioned that word "that" came from that would be the sixth beatitude, that pure in heart, cleansed and pure in heart in Aramaic, that liba. Liba is that word. It's the place where thought and feeling come together. It's exactly what you cover in the worksheet, how you write down how you're feeling and then the thoughts connected to them. That is the heart. You can almost take that section of the worksheet and put a nice, big, beautiful red heart around it, because that's the thing. It's getting in touch with those. And, of course, most of the people are like, well, what does it make sense how I'm feeling, and how can my thoughts be connected to that? Because we've been so anesthetized, and we're so sort of dumbed down and tranced in our culture that we don't realize that the very thing we were told not to do, the very light that we were told not to go near because somehow it's a fire of hell that's going to burn you, was the very light within the center of our being that we are, in fact, supposed to stir up and have that catalyst expand within us. It's not the darkness we're afraid of, in the words of Marianne Williamson, of course. It's the light. You can hide in the darkness. And, yeah, I'm glad to be on the team. It's awesome. It's just awesome to, go around. I was in Wilmington, North Carolina this past weekend, and it was just a huge crowd, and everybody was so enthusiastic, and it was just amazing. And I'm literally telling everyone, wow, you all are here. You're walking the talk. This is what it's really about. It's not about talking about it. It's about walking it. It's about living it. And that's why I'm so honored to be alive and awake right now. People ask me would I want to be alive back when Yeshua walked the earth. I'm like, I'm here for a specific purpose. And who's to say I wasn't alive back then? But this moment is just awesome. Everything's happening so quick, and it's a choice whether we want to see what's falling apart or what's awakening. And I will say, you mentioned that happiness. It's interesting how we somehow in the West have confused happiness with joy, and unfortunately, happiness. The difference between happiness and joy is like the difference between decision and choice. Of course, decision, decide, to cut something into pieces and then try to stick it all back together. Interesting. Whereas choice is something that's conscious. It's the same with happiness. Happiness is okay. It's nice. It's good to feel good. But happiness is based on conditions. When certain goals or conditions are met, you feel happy. However, joy is something much different. Joy is a small child. When he said, be as the children. Joy, of course, is when you're removing those bushel baskets and the light shines brighter and brighter and brighter, and you're able to be so fully present in this present moment that joy is that natural expansion, the natural flow of the one coming through us, as opposed to something conditional like happiness. Happy's okay, but 9 out of the 10 people that I, talk to and they say, oh, I'm okay, you can see on their face that they're almost like they've been sucking on a sour lemon, or you'll feel that plastic I'm happy kind of thing, and you can feel this obsessive, passive-aggressive compulsion underneath it, and that's all a matter of not doing the work. Somehow candy coating it, let's pour some sugar on top and paint the gloss on there and not do the work, but that's not going to work anymore because all of our stuff is coming up. The way I explain it to people is it's like a balloon. You just blow into a balloon right off, it's going to be tough. Your lungs aren't quite, maybe not strong enough for it. The balloon hasn't been worked and cultured, but if you take the time to do a little bit and do a little more and a little more, and you stretch that balloon and you blow into it a little, you let it contract a little, you blow in a little more, you let it contract, and you keep stretching it, you keep working it, eventually it's going to get easier to blow that balloon bigger and bigger. But the bigger it gets, the more you can see all those little bits of goop and gook in the corners. You can see those places on the balloon places where it's strong, places where it looks like it's a little bit thin, and you're able to start working with those. And if people could realize that, we're so afraid of the balloon bursting that we don't realize that, in fact, there's no balloon. That balloon is the ape. It's what Yeshua called the hypocrite or the veil, and it does need to pop. But if we're constantly not increasing the catalyst, not increasing the light, not putting the breath into that balloon, it's never going to get to that point. And, the realization, of course, is that nothing is going to pop up in any moment that's more than we can handle. And, and that's really, this works if you work it. So.
When you mentioned Dead Sea and that word in that particular beatitude we were talking about, it kind of takes me back to when we were originally creating the poster that we have on the Beatitudes, which of course is available on the website. You can go have a look at it if you're not familiar with the Beatitudes from Matthew 5, which each one of them starts out with an invitation to recognize there's work to be done, and that doing the work is about accessing the neural structure. But that particular one, there was kind of a toss-up. There was a lot of discussion between Dan McDougall and myself as I was creating that poster about that particular translation. It verges on, and I'd love to have your input on it, saying that this neural structure that was implanted by God to guide us to happiness and well-being becomes your conscious possession, you who are in possession and control of the source of your thinking. That when you're conscious of what the root of it is, so often you talk to people and say, well, why are you thinking that? What are you feeling? Why are you feeling that? And they just have no idea what the source of their thinking is. And I almost put that into the translation, and then Dan vetoed it. He said, well, we can't go quite that far to say that. But I'd love your input on that word Dead Seeing, because I did leave it out of the poster at Dan's veto, but would love to have your thoughts on it.
Well, actually, going back even to what you said too, to sort of add it as a base, is that that word tuvehun. It's even actually pre-neuronal. The EY sound in the middle of tuvehun genders that word feminine, which means that it's a state of being, meaning that it's not even neural structure so much as it's the consciousness that brings that neural structure into being. And that in that sixth beatitude, actually and that's why I love it, because you're completely focused on, you're totally and completely focused on the living of it. And you don't have to, I shouldn't say you don't have to, because I'm sure you do occasionally, but a lot of times I'm in sort of the lion's den of all the freaking scholars, bless their heart, who are so obsessive about little letters and things like that. And that word in the sixth beatitude, it's actually, the C is more of a K, it's that Cain. And what that actually means is literally it's pure, it's clean. Although it's not the word version, it brings me back to that. It's that place where there's nothing on top. It's been purified. And you think about that, of course. I sort of talk about the bursting of the balloon, or it's like you lift the veils, and then when you're down to the last veil, there's no more I am anymore. There's simply the I. In other words, when you do the work and you completely cleanse and purify your heart, you shall literally realize and or see God. That word God is Allah in Aramaic, which means absolute only being. In other words, there's nothing outside of God. We have this Christian God that somehow is a power person, this bizarre codependent relationship with some power energy guy out there. But in fact, what that actually meant in Aramaic was essentially when you are pure in your thoughts and your feelings. And one of the things I want to say to people is, look, if you're in a human body, there's still something else to do. There's still work to do. This isn't necessarily saying that you got to clean single thing out of your system before you can realize oneness. That's not it at all. In fact, it just happens in 1 microsecond. It happens in any moment. In the East, they call it satori, instant enlightenment. And in the West, we think, ooh, instant enlightenment. All of a sudden, I'm awake and it lasts forever. That's not necessarily what satori means. Satori is a moment where we're 100% completely open. We're totally and completely whole, empty and whole at the same time, empty, spacious, and complete all at the same time right now in this present moment, which, of course, takes me back to that word, the tuv, from tuvehun. And what tuv is it actually is the word ripe, R-I-P-E, like a piece of fruit. And what ripe means is it means fully present right now in this moment. In other words, the tuve hun, that state of blessedness, it's feminine, which means it's not a blessing. You can't get a blessing or give a blessing because it's not a thing. It's a state of being. And that state of being only exists right now in this present moment when we can be pure in heart and pure in our thoughts. And that is exactly what forgiveness is. It's removing the root of my suffering, or removing the root of anything, any kind of veil, any kind of BS, any kind of ideology, belief system, of course, any of that somehow conceals me from being fully present right now with whatever is happening in this moment, which, of course, is the second beatitude, which is about stepping into your emotions and feelings. It was literally the desert mothers and fathers who would actually go out and they would bring up subject matter of different things that were happening in the greater culture, and they would go within themselves and clear those places out within themselves, the abid or the abvile. They would literally go in and go and step into how they felt and how they thought about that. And I'm telling people, it's not about trying to fix something out in the world. It's about being fully present right now. Whatever is resonating for you right now, take care of that. Whatever's resonating in the next moment, take care of that. It's really, if we could each just do our piece, the whole system we would realize is not broken. It's actually working perfectly. It's just we've thrown all kinds of dirt and crap and gook into the system that we don't even know how it works anymore as a culture. We've completely lost it. And that's why it's so important that these teachings come back. And that's why I'm driven the way that I am, not to necessarily rule the world or create in any way, but just to get this again, like we began, to every mind on the planet, every heart on the planet. It's why I'm here, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
Well, we're delighted to get to share the planet with you, and the work that you're doing is awesome. We're down to about 45 seconds, so I'll just say that if you want to touch into what Dale's doing, go to daleallenhoffman.com. You do have in North Carolina a 2-day intensive coming up. And if people want to get a hold of...
May 9th through 11th,
May 9th through 11th. So if you want to take yourself a healing vacation, go to daleallenhoffman.com. Check out his intensive there. Residential, is that correct, Dale?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And, of course, you've got DVDs and CDs and all kinds of great stuff on your site and on your YouTube channel. You can just... tap in and hear more of what Dale's saying, and we're looking at creating, we haven't gotten down to any details, perhaps in June, something in North Carolina with Dale where we're cooperatively create something in the way of a mini or maybe a full intensive. I don't know. We'll have to see how that comes together. We'll also be flying out of Costa Rica on the 28th, and on the 31st, I believe it is, the Sunday, the last Sunday in March, first Sunday in April. We'll be at Unity in Henderson, Nevada, starting there. So keep tapping to what we're doing. We appreciate you. Have a blessed day. Bring a stranger to the show tomorrow, and give the world the best gift you possibly can. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. Blessings. Thanks, Dale.